Right, okay. Last album then. Well, so we've talked about this band a couple of times, so they don't really need an introduction. It is Welfare Jazz by Viagra Boys. This is their second full-length album, released on the 8th of January 2021 on year 0001 Records. It's 13 tracks and approximately 40 minutes long. So we've talked, like I say, we've talked about Viagra Boys. Their the deluxe version of their album Streetworms went into the Scratchcast Hall of Fame, and we talked about their Common Sense EP last year, which we were fairly positive about as well. So with Streetworms being a podcast favourite and Common Sense being like a nice addition, how excited were you for new Viagra Boys album?
I was pretty excited. I mean, I enjoyed the Common Sense EP, but I think I was quite critical of it. I think I said previously that the Common Sense EP was made with common sense sensibilities, and it kind of felt a lot more restrained rather than their previous offerings. But I think they've came back with a vengeance with this album.
Well, I think Common Sense showed a few different
stylistic differences.
Styles, yeah. Showed a sort of broad different style, and I think this album does as well. I mean,
it does.
I don't think it's just another Viagra Boys album. I think you might not guess that from the first song. The first single, Ain't Nice, is basically a straight up Viagra Boys banger, which is really good. Have you seen the video for it?
Yeah, he's kind of walking down the street, isn't he, and nicking folks' bikes and stuff like that, isn't he?
Yeah, he's basically like off his tits and like walking, like the camera kind of pans down the street as he walks along, and he's just generally causing mayhem. Like he spews on the street, he steals a scooter from a kid and then like tries to do a trick and like messes it up, and then he steals somebody's jacket. He tries and fails to steal a dude's bike. He gets in a fight, and then at one point the camera just keeps going and the music keeps playing, and he goes out of shot, and then at a sort of pivotal moment in the song he comes back in the shot on the micro scooter from the start, and his jacket's on fire. It's it's just a really good video in that sort of classic Viagra Boys style, I suppose. So I mean that first track's just, it's got that kind of typical kind of bass grunt that with lots of kind of weird electronics and spurts of saxophone that you would expect. And then it kind of like the next track is it kind of took me off guard a little bit because I was expecting it to kind of continue with that momentum, and it just throws in like a short, smoky kind of saxophone interlude.
Yeah, Coldplay.
Yeah, Coldplay. Which I wasn't expecting, and I think it threw me off a little bit on the first listen. Just there were things on the album that I wasn't expecting, and it just threw me off a little bit. But the more I've listened to it, the more I've found that I really quite enjoy it.
What did you make of Toad, the third track?
It's a weird one. It's like it's got a really good bass groove, and it's got this kind of weird jangly kind of Western steel guitar mixed in, and it seems to be like, I guess it's just a song about like, oh, I don't need women, I don't need, I don't need anyone. I'm just this free spirit like rambling between towns. And there's a good line in it where he goes, "By the time the morning comes, baby, I'll be hopping right on out of here, just like a frog or a toad, like a toad." And that was what kind of endeared me to the song, was that line in particular.
Yeah, I suppose to provide a bit of context with regards to the album. So I read an article that he did. He did an interview with the NME with a woman by the name of Becky Rogers, which dated on the 13th of January. And he stated that a lot of their previous material had basically been a celebration of being fucked up, and that if they were an emo band, they would be making music that celebrates that. Um, there's a kind of negativity and kind of wallowing in it somewhat, but instead Viagra Boys have always kind of made a party out of it. However, in that same interview, he states that this album was written in the context of a lot of his friends telling him that he was a jerk, and that his girlfriend split up with him around about that time as well. So he acknowledged in that interview that he was in quite a bad place at the time, and he was quite depressed, and found that the process of writing this album for him was quite cathartic. And I think you can see elements of that themes being explored throughout the course of the album. So we mentioned Ain't Nice, so obviously Ain't Nice. As you said, it's just another kind of weird and wacky, quintessential Viagra Boys track, where, there's lyrics that include like, "You ain't that nice, but you got a nice face. Hope I can fit all my shit at your place." Collection of vintage calculators. "If you don't like it, well, babe, I'll see you later." So it kind of paints the kind of central antagonist as being quite an abrasive, difficult, kind of awkward person. And like you said, in Toad, he's saying he's just gonna, jump on out of here. I think in that same song he says that he doesn't need a woman telling him when he needs to brush his teeth and what have you. But I think he kind of mellows throughout the course of the. He does kind of mellow. We're then kind of treated to "This Old Dog," which I quite enjoyed, even though it's this kind of weird kind of spoken word poem. Um, there really isn't all that much to it, but he's kind of putting on this kind of weird voice. Anyway, I don't think that's his usual accent. I know he kind of speaks with this kind of Southern American drawl anyway, but I definitely think he's putting on a voice in that song, or
Yeah,
that
and
piece.
what I mean, it's what, like 30 seconds long,
It's not
um,
at all, man.
something like that, and it's that voice he puts on reminds me a little bit of like Best in Show, and it
I
sets
think
up it sets up a couple of tracks that are on the album later, because it talks about his kind of paranoia about his dog, like watching him and judging him and like spying on him. And he's like, I think my dog was once a spy, a double agent in disguise, and that sets up sets up some stuff later on.
Yeah, because does it not end with like, "He says many things but does not speak," or something like
Yes, something like that. Yeah, or he knows many things.
that? He knows many
I
things
can't
too.
remember, but yeah, it's that kind of idea. It's just a general like distrust of, just a general paranoia which comes from like, I think
Taking
is
lots of drugs.
from taking lots of drugs. Exactly.
um, just to go back to kind of what I was saying earlier on, I think certainly in kind of track number 5, "Into the Sun," which opens with this kind of gloomy, shuffling kind of bass riff, before it starts getting layered up with some more kind of floaty and ethereal electronics. I think there's a definitive kind of directional shift in the kind of lyrical content. As I said, I think it's round about here where he kind of starts mellowing. And seems to be kind of repenting for the things that he'd done in the past, specifically stating on one occasion that he would do anything to take back the things that he had done. But for me, "Creatures," like the next track number 6, that was one of my favourites. I definitely thought it showed a kind of different side to the band. Opens with this kind of pulsating electronic sound, which is carried over from the previous track. Kind of "Into the Sun" kind of bleeds into "Creatures." before kind of bursting into this really kind of confident, luxurious, and kind of polished post-punk new wave kind of synth riff, with this kind of surprisingly upbeat chorus to boot. Again, the lyrics are quite weird and wacky. Kind of talks about living underwater at the bottom. Yeah.
So there's a really good article on Stereo Gum, which is basically just an interview with Sebastian Murphy, where they go through every track on the album and he discusses like the sort of ideas behind the songs and things. So a lot of what you've said about kind of some of the other songs, you know, he talks about that, like where Toad is just him being this asshole basically and refusing to change, and like Into the Sun is him kind of almost admitting his faults and trying to repent. I think Creatures is just about his life as a speed addict, basically being a creature, essentially living with all the other creatures, and like trading stories about like electronic equipment that they've found or stolen, and just weird stuff like that. Because he mentions that for a good portion of his life with his previous girlfriend, he just would wake up, take some speed, and then spend his day like soldering like random pieces of electronic equipment, and he had like a mad collection of electronics, which he had kind of alludes to on Toad, where he says he's got all these vintage calculators and he needs all this space for his stuff. So there are like these weird undertones of like his bizarre life that he was living for a number of years.
I've written here, as I said, he kind of sings about kind of living under the water and at the bottom, and I've written here possibly a metaphor for living on the peripheries of society. So obviously, he kind of talk. I think there's one lyric where he says that he used to live there too. He couldn't breathe, but he didn't care as long as he had a microchip to keep him up at night. Possibly a metaphor for drugs. I don't know. Does any of his electronics feature in the songs? Like, are they musical electronics or
like? Because he built these, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I mean, actually know whether he's kind of created these sounds from like cobbled together kit or what, but yeah, I mean, Creatures, if you forget about all that stuff and just listen to it's a pretty cool song, like it's sort of 80s synth vibe, but I don't get on that well with it because just his vocals in the chorus I don't like that much. It is growing on me, but I quite like the verse, but his vocals just kind of grate on me a little bit in the chorus, which doesn't ruin it. It just kind of lessens my enjoyment of it. Let's put it like that. But and that like it's that's a totally different song to what we've heard really on these other, like on the other album and the EP. Whereas Six Shooter, the next track is pretty much well, it's very similar to Amphetanarchy on Streetworms. It's just like a full on grooving instrumental track, which is just kind of the Viagra Boys sound, with a driving bass and like a sort of this sort of caged saxophone that kind of like it has this thing where it tries to kind of break free, and then towards the end it gets its kind of chance to take off a bit. I found kind of when I was listening to this song, I found my mind wandering a bit, and I was just kind of imagining like if they were playing this live, like what would Seb be doing? Like,
well, if you watch, he's
seen him on a few live clips.
He just kind of goes like this mostly.
But other times he sort of stalks around the stage and like rolls about on the ground, and like I've seen him. I can't remember what it was, but he was like just lying on the ground puking in a bucket at one point. It's like really. I don't know if that was when he was kind of off his tits, but or if that's like a persona or whatever. But
it's difficult to know, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I just found myself kind of imagining what he would be doing like on the stage while that song was going on. But it's quite good. It's like, you know, it's just got a nice groove that you can lock into. You've then got Best in Show 2, which is a short sequel. I suppose it's more of a homage than like a because it's not really a. Is Best in Show a song like a longer? Is it longer? I can't remember.
Best in Show is longer than Best in Show 2.
Yeah.
Because I think it does it not. Does it detail a race? I can't remember. I've got a feeling that like this is a repetition of Best in Show from Streetworms with added effects and echoes.
But in Streetworms, it's more like it's like Crufts in space or something like that.
It's a commentary on something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but Best in Show 2 is it kind of leads on from that, but it's far more like evil and demented. Like the dog is like becoming, I don't know, it's like a supervillain or something. It's like it's like there's a couple lines. It's like the dog's like he thrives in his own decadence, or the earth belongs to him, and those lines are delivered in this really evil sounding, really deep voice, while the rest of it is in this sort of kind of echoey southern drawl. But it's those bits that sound particularly what's the word I'm looking for?
Ominous.
Ominous is exactly what I'm looking for. So it's quite interesting. I mean, it's just a kind of stupid little interlude, but it's quite entertaining. And then Secret Canine Agent, again, kind of goes back to his suspicion of that his dog, and it's basically a sequel to
Frogstrap,
where Frogstrap was like, you know, a was it a tetrapod that is like a secret agent frog, like
yeah,
the frog with the microphone attached to him.
They do specifically mention frog strap, like somebody wearing a frog strap.
He does, yeah. He does mention a frog strap in the song, and it's even this sort of that driving bass line is pretty much exactly the same as Frogstrap. Yeah. It's got a different. The vocals are slightly smokier, and it's got like it is different, but that sort of driving bass line is very, very similar. But it's again, it's a very Viagra Boys song, I suppose.
And I suppose as is Girls and Boys, like the next track.
Well, there's I Feel Alive in between, which is a bit different. It's got like a sort of a flute part and stuff, and like it's quite mysterious, and I think it's kind of an almost ironic song about like he's saying I feel alive, but he's actually kind of more he's in like he's at kind of rock bottom. But yeah, Girls and Boys is again, I mean I've written here classic Viagra Boys, but with a disco beat.
Did you see you likened it to sports there?
No, I just said classic Viagra Boys.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me about sports. I'd love to know what the connection is with shrimps, because there's like a lyric that says the only real friends I've got, shrimps. That is like a motif that features throughout the course of the band's work. And I'd love to know what the connection, shrimps and dogs. Yeah,
but it comes that bit's great because it comes after like it goes Girls, they always try to tie me down. Boys, they want to go out on the town. And then he later goes, dogs, the only real friends I got. And he's like, shrimps. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's like the part of the album where I actually like laughed out loud. It's just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Aye, it's really good. We've got then To the Country, which feels just that. It's kind of strange country number. Perhaps one of the most refrained and somber tracks on the album. There's kind of sparse piano. Again, that kind of restrained saxophone. Um, um, for me, it kind of felt as if it was maybe a bit of a kind of prelude to the album's final track. In Spite of Ourselves, which is a cover of an American folk and country singer, John Prine, who passed away last year on the 7th of April due to complications caused by the COVID-19 crisis. The song's a duet, and John Prine originally sang the song with a singer by the name of Iris Dement. In this case, Murphy is joined by Amy Taylor from the Australian punk band Amyl and the Sniffers, whom we previously reviewed on episode number 3, so like way back, in episode number 3 of the Scratchcast podcast. Needless to say, the band kind of put their own spin on the track. It kind of opens with these, I kind of described it as kind of really disjointed and unsettling kind of cacophony of kind of guitar slides and the kind of shuffling drum beat. Which, yeah, it didn't really sit very well to me, but that's relatively kind of short-lived, and then it kind of dissipates, and then the singers start the duet around the kind of 35-second mark. And I thought they'd maybe kind of tweaked around with the lyrics.
So did I,
but they hadn't. They haven't at all.
It's a very like you. I thought, oh, maybe they've changed the lyrics, because they are very. I mean, despite the sort of country leanings, you wouldn't necessarily know. I mean, I didn't know this was a cover the first time I heard it.
No, I
mean, I don't know much about John Prine anyway, but just from the sort of lyrical content, you'd be like, well, this is just a Viagra Boys with a country song with a country twist. So, and the John Prine version's all right. It's more acousticy,
yeah,
and far more like traditional country in the vocals and some of the instrumental parts. But I think this is one of my favourite songs on the album.
it is a good track, man. It is a good track.
And similarly to The Country is one of my favourite songs as well. I just like how completely different these last two tracks are. It's which is always good to see bands trying something different rather than just kind of sticking with what they know people like. And it's weird because they're both kind of country songs, and so which normally turns me off. But I suppose they're sort of far more, they're darker and more twisted, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. But I think it's definitely worth checking out that Stereogum article if you want to know more about the every track on the album, basically.
Yeah, I think I will have a listen to that. Well, sorry, have a read of that.
Cool. How would you rate this then?
So I've given it a strong 8, possibly a 9.
Yeah, I'll go with an 8. And to be honest, like the first time I listened to it, I was a bit like it felt a bit disjointed, and I was just a bit like I don't really know about this. But now that I've given it a bit more of a chance, I do really like it. I don't think it's got quite the same impact that Streetworms had, but I still think it's really good. So a strong 8, definitely.
Cool, man. Cool.
All right then. So that was jazz welfare. No, it was welfare jazz. Jazz welfare is something you go on when you can't get a gig, is it?
That's when the COVID-19 wrecks the the music and entertainment industry.
Right. Okay. So welfare jazz by Viagra Boys.
It's not finished. It's finished.